he'd heard something, and he goes, "Dad, did you sell your business for $2 million?" And I was like, "It's actually $2 billion. I didn't want to go to 2.5. Just like, I remember when our head of product came into our office to say, like, "Hey guys, like, we need a credit card.
We need a physical card.
A physical card." And Blake and I almost shut the company down. I remember.
Alex Bean, you were the co-founder of Divvy, which sold for over $2.5 billion just a couple of years ago. You, after exiting the company, felt lost after supposedly fulfilling this dream.
Yeah.
You've now since gained a greater purpose. You're working on new projects. You're giving back. And I want to get into the story of Divvy and Tandem and the Factory for Good and all these things that you're involved in right now. But first, tell me about your upbringing. What sort of early life leads to these outcomes? And it's all your parents' fault, right? Like they're the reason why you found this success?
Yeah. No, I mean, I grew up, I would gladly say I grew up in the top 0.1% of the world, meaning great parents, great family, great part of the world. Grew up in Seattle. So one of the things I would say that was interesting about my childhood is I was born in the 80s, early 80s, and grew up in a town called Redmond, which at the time was like this small cow town. I'm not even kidding. It was like a, off the map, hour away from Seattle type thing. And as a kid, you just saw the whole city just elevated, like my whole childhood. It was because Microsoft, obviously. And so my neighbor wrote Windows 95, one of the lead developers of Windows 95. And then my other neighbor was another lead developer. And you just see their success and all the neighborhoods and kids and everyone's dad worked for Microsoft. So there is an element of like, you see a successful business and you see the effects of it into your city and into all these families. And it is inspiring. It is something that like starts to shape you and starts to think like, oh wait, what's happening? And like, how did this happen? And what is this? And so when you grow up around, again, it wasn't just Microsoft. It was like Nintendo was just up the street. Costco was in the city next door. Amazon, came. So a lot of these amazing businesses that we now know and love were started in my hometown, so to speak. And so that shaped a lot, I would say, as a kid, just kind of seeing that. And then I'm the youngest of 6. So, you see your older brothers. I have 4 brothers, and you see kind of them go out and them try to be entrepreneurs. And my dad's an entrepreneur, my grandpa's an entrepreneur, my great grandpa's an entrepreneur, and you just kind of see these patterns, and you're like, all right, I think it fills you with confidence. I think I can do this.
Like I know it works for somebody.
It's working for somebody, so maybe it can work for me too. And you tried stuff, and I think first businesses were started in like junior high, and then I tried stuff in high school and tried stuff in college, and most of them obviously failed miserably. But you try these different things, and you realize that failure is not that bad. It's okay, and you just keep trying and trying and trying, and obviously, eventually one worked out. But I grew up in a fun part of the world at a great time.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing up your grandpa and your great-grandfather as well. Because from your book, Factory for Good, you go through the story of how they were both successful, but had wildly different endings to their lives. Can you briefly share the difference between your great-grandfather and then your grandfather, and then how that affected your approach to business?
So so let me re-ask the question. You can answer it for yourself, or just hypothetically how people would answer, right? And the question is like, well, what is success? What is success?
I mean, you could say financially, there's a number you could hit. You could say that having the people you love around you as often as possible, being fulfilled through work. I think work's important. And so some combination of those things, I would imagine. Combination
of, right? And we'll get to what I think success is, I think, as we talk in this podcast. But my great-grandpa was a successful man. My grandpa, from a financial standpoint, was way more successful. And he was an amazing man. I want to be clear. Like, my grandpa was an idol of mine in the sense of like, he was the man in Seattle back in the day. And, he helped bring the Seahawks to Seattle. He owned, 400 stores, and he was just like a god at the time. Right. And so I respect his business acumen, and he had all the financial success anyone could ever dream of. And what was sad though is I grew up, and I grew up around him, and grew up around, you saw the effects of money. That's the way I would say it.
Yeah.
and you saw kind of the what that could do to all sorts of personal relationships, and how that can affect people personally, and that can lead to all sorts of things. And again, in our family, we have a lot of great people, great cousins, great aunts and uncles, great parents, great my grandpa. But it did lead to a lot of these relationships where, like, I grew up 20 minutes from my grandpa, and yet I'd see him once a year. And that always struck me as odd. And then as he was getting older and about to die, I was a teenager, and you start to realize, like, oh, he's not as happy as you would think the most successful person I've ever heard of should be.
Right.
And I compare that to my great grandpa, who, I actually never met, but just was, talked about in the community in a way that was super impressive, and people revered him and loved him. And not just from look at how much money he has, but in what he did for the local church, what he did for the local community, what he did for family. And so to me, ultimately the reason I wrote the book was because when success was fortunate to come to my doorstep, I sat there and I said, wait a minute, what was the difference between my great grandpa and my grandpa? Although both were financially successful, how do I be more like my great grandpa in terms of what his definition of success was? And so it was like, well, how do I write a playbook, or how do I make sure I turn out more like what I think my great grandpa turned out? And so, it was a journey. It was a process to try to figure out, but ultimately that's the difference, right? Is it wasn't just about money. Success should be broadly defined by, yes, there is some element of, monetary gain for family and all the things that you need. But success should be a lot more about relationships and about fulfillment and things like that.
Hey guys, real quick, I'm doing the edit for the video right now, and I just realized I forgot to say this at any point during the video. But if you like what Alex just said, go ahead and drop a like on the video. It really does a lot for the channel. Now back to what he was just saying. And I'm sure you had the strong realization that, like, there's much more to this than just the check that comes in the mail. And I understand your check from Divvy actually came a little late. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, but, that's its own other story.
But there's more to it than just the check that comes in the mail. And I'm sure you had a very strong realization once you got your check. But did you have that same sort of realization as you were growing up, or earlier stages in your career as well?
So what I would say I knew growing up, so my dad ended up, he was in the family business. He ended up leaving the family business because the family business got sold. And when family businesses get sold, they get rid of the family. So my dad ended up getting fired or pushed out, and then he ended up becoming a wealth manager. And one of the reasons he became a wealth manager was because he didn't want to see money take over people's lives. He wanted to be like, no, I'll help you manage it so you can just live life. Like, you can be with the people you love, and we can handle a lot of the extracurricular stuff. So there was always like money conversations in my household, whether spoken or unspoken, but like I saw how money became keeping up with the Joneses for some people. I was aware of how some people use their money for really cool things that people didn't know about. I saw how money both corrupted and enabled people to do amazing things. And because of that, I just feel like I was always cognizant of the power of money as a kid. And, but that didn't change my desire to seek it. I want to be clear on this. Like, when I started my career, I wanted to make money. And when we started Divvy, we had conversations, Blake and I, of like, as you're building it and going, once you realize you have something, you're like, what's your number?
Yeah.
What's your mountain? And like, I'd give him a number, and I was motivated for that, but I would hopefully think that I was at least had a healthy enough relationship with money to know that it wasn't the be all end all, and that was by no means the definition of happiness. And yet it still caught me off guard when money did come and the business was sold, and I was surprised at how I felt after.
Yeah, I would say, not being in the situation, but from the outside looking in, along the way you could profess to say, well, I know it's more than just the money. But it's not something that you have to prove that you really feel that way until you have the money, until you have the struggle of, well, how do you manage the money, and also the fulfillment. And I can say along the way, like, oh, this podcast isn't about the money. My day job's not about the money, because
it's always easier to look up the change. So here's one of the things I've learned, right? Like, people always say, well, why that person above me should give more money, right? Taxes, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Or charity, it doesn't matter. Well, they could give so much more. And then someone will be like, well, why don't you give more? And you're like, well, but they have so much more. And it's like, yeah, but if you look down your chain, that you have way more than that person. And they're looking up at you and saying, why don't you give, and it's very easy to point the finger. And I, this is maybe a horrible example, but I'm going to give it. Remember Tiger Woods? Remember the scandal that Tiger Woods had where, ultimately he was having all these affairs? And obviously, a lot of people would judge Tiger Woods for that, and I remember my circles did, and it like came to me, and I think it hit me. I was like, wait a minute, it's easy for me to judge Tiger and say like, oh my gosh, look what he did, and then I realized, to be fair, I'm not in his shoes, meaning like I don't travel 300 plus days a year. I don't have like every woman on the planet giving me their number and saying like, where do I meet you? Like that doesn't happen to me when I travel, right? So I can't judge Tiger for his actions. I can be like, I wish he made different decisions, but ultimately like to judge him on that would be, I think, disingenuous. And I think it's very similar with money. And money is the most relative thing on the planet. You're thinking, like, if I asked you, I won't ask you this because it's a very personal question, but if I said, what's your number that, you would need to retire, or whatever you want, whatever your universal basic income number is, you give me a number. And the reality is once you get that number, 99 million out of 100, I'm just like, there's a rare few, but most everyone will get to that number and then be like, oh, shoot. It's actually not as much as I was thinking. I need a little bit more. And you're going to always look above and say, well, I need more. There's more I can go get. And that's what, that's one of the things that money can do, become relative, become corruptive, is because it's like insatiable.
Yeah. I love that you brought up the Tiger Woods example, honestly. Cause I wasn't thinking of Tiger Woods specifically, but I was thinking it's like the man who says like, oh, I would never, be unfaithful to my spouse, but like you've also never been tested, no one's thrown themselves at you all day, every day. And so,
and to the degree to use like the money example is everyone's like, well, I would give all my money away.
Yeah.
Like, okay. And then when you get there, and I'm not saying I'm even there, wherever there is, it's a relative number. Then it's like, okay, now let's see what you or those people do. And I just, it's an interesting position for sure.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you acknowledging that. So let's walk it back just a little bit. Okay. So you had all these, we'll call it failed entrepreneurship ventures, and then here with Blake Murray, how did the idea for Divvy come about, and what even, for those unfamiliar, what even was Divvy?
Yeah, so this is 2016. Blake called me in February of 16, and Blake and I knew each other in Seattle, so we're both from Seattle. Shocker, his dad worked for Microsoft, like everyone else's dad. So Blake called me, and he's like, "Hey, I have this idea," and his idea basically was, Venmo's now popular, right? Becoming popular. And Apple Pay is coming out. And he initially was like, well, I want to pay my son, I want to give him Venmo, but he has to have his own bank account, but he's like 8, he can't have his own bank account. Like that was the original core. And when he came to my house, we were talking about this in that meeting, in that discussion, we were basically like, well, what if we did Venmo and Apple Pay for business? So could we create a credit card that had software on it, had intelligence on it? So when, the marketing team went to Vegas to do a conference, the budget could be 10,000 and everyone can know exactly how much money there is. Instead of swiping first and asking for forgiveness later, they could actually see how much money there was, collaborate as a team, send money between each other as a team, but their credit card would not go over $10,000. So that was Blake and I's like original idea. Like all people in the early stages of your idea, we're like, we're geniuses, we've got it. And in some respects we were right, in some respects we were wrong, and we like nailed certain things where we were like dead on, and other things we were just totally off. Like as an example, Apple Pay, which is funny because we're finally here. Like I've realized now in the last like 6 months, I'd never carry my wallet because everyone has Apple Pay. So I'm like, oh, thank goodness. But in 2016, we were like, well, we don't need a credit card. Like when we built Divvy, we didn't initially have a credit card because we're like, it can be on the phone. It needs to be on the phone. That's where the information is. That's where you see how much is left in your budget. That's where you send and request money. So we're like, no credit card. I remember when our head of product came into our office to say like, hey guys, like we need a credit card.
We need a physical card.
A physical card. And Blake and I almost shut the company down. I remember it because it was like, well, that just ruined it. It becomes sloppy. It becomes like everyone else. It just becomes like, well, that's dumb.
Then it's not what the vision was anymore.
It's not what the vision was. And, the product team was great. And, Blake and I, we all got together and we figured out like, oh, okay, we can still get elements of what we wanted to do, but there does need to be a physical card. Because like at a restaurant at the time, what are you going to give your phone with the password to the server who's going to walk over and do it? Now they at least come to your table and stuff. But yeah, no, so that's what Divvy was. 2016 is when he called me. We started building it. We started building it officially in August of 16. We thought we would be live by January of 2017, like in 5 months. Mm-hmm. And we were ready in January of 2018.
Yeah, you guys built for 2 years without really publicly releasing anything.
Yeah.
So walk me through that kind of strategy as well. Like, was that because there was no MVP to release, or you just wanted a better iteration of your MVP?
So I remember these conversations. It's funny. It feels like yesterday, and yet it feels like a bazillion years ago.
Yeah.
I remember one of our engineers, I won't name names, but one of our better early engineers came to me and he's like, basically said, why don't you just do virtual cards first? Mm-hmm. Like, why do you need expense management and budgets? Like, why don't we just launch virtual cards? We'll get that out and then we'll start layering on this other stuff. And, Blake and I, the thing I always admired about Blake is we're going big or we're going home. Mm-hmm. Like, Blake was not in there to hit a safe single. Blake was there to be like, no, we're either taking on Amex, Concur, Expensify, and every bank you've ever heard of, or we're not doing this thing. Mm-hmm. Like, so, Blake was like, let's go for it. And also I had been selling the product like via Figma clickable prototype for months at the time. So I'm like, no. But what they want is the package. Mm. They want budgets and expense reports and virtual cards. That's what we're selling them.
So we can't release some smaller MVP.
So we basically said, no, like we have to just do this all. It has to all work together. Let's not piecemeal it. Mm-hmm. Now we were fortunate. We'd raised money from friends and family. It allowed us to do that. And, we were in a position that we didn't have to piecemeal it and we could go back. But frankly, there were a lot of players that piecemealed it and we just swallowed them up, us and Brex, and those guys are just gone. So, I would say it worked out for us to just go big or go home. And it's because we were trying to build this like collective product, this comprehensive product that we could go to market and be like, no, we can replace all of your credit cards. Mm-hmm. Let's get rid of them. And it took us a long time to build. And there's a lot of things that happened in there, like the bank switching out on us and new APIs, because fintech is literally finance and tech coming together. And at the time, it was a lot more fin than tech. So like APIs, I'll give you a very good example. And this is probably boring for some of the listeners, but when you swipe your credit card, that transaction didn't get posted at the bank until midnight. It was kind of like a fake post. And then it would actually post at midnight because they'd basically at like 12 a.m., that's when they would process all of their transactions for the day.
Okay.
But that means our budgets weren't live because we wouldn't get the actual information until midnight.
Until the next day.
But your whole team is spending throughout the day. And I'm like, we need it now. Mm-hmm. And the banks were like, yeah, that's not possible. We're like, it's also not that hard. But they're like, our APIs don't exist. So we had to like write fake APIs and scrapers and, a lot of this stuff before. Now it's like the easiest thing on the planet to get that information. At the time, it wasn't. Mm-hmm. So it was really laborious at the beginning to build into these banks and to try to build the technology we were going to build because they just weren't set up for it.
Mm-hmm. And from my understanding, like as you're building in tech, especially the idea of like an agile mindset, as you do build it in piecemeal.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to, but you often also release in piecemeal. So you can test and see like, oh, did we build that correctly? Are the users actually wanting it in that way? And so the way that you did build Divvy kind of goes against the grain of how other tech companies have been built. Is my understanding off?
No, that's fair and not fair. It's fair in the sense that you're right. We did launch it all as one, but we also like did have some beta testers. I mean, they were like my family. Like it's like my brother. I basically called my brother and be like, your business is signed up for Divvy. Congratulations. Called my dad. Hey, guess what? And so like we had some outside users. But again, we couldn't go to these businesses and say, get rid of Expensify until we had built the Expensify replacement.
Yeah.
We couldn't say, get rid of your Amex card until we had built the Amex replacement. So we had people, like very light beta users, testing it to tell us what was working and not working. We just ended up not really being able to sell it. So like, for example, we went to market. We finally had some real customers in January of 2018. Really, though, it was like April of 2018 when we had the features where we could start actually selling this thing. And over the next, the next 6-7 months is when it was like, okay, it started to go up, and then we never looked back. But so yeah, no, it's not, and I wouldn't even go, I do venture capital now. I don't tell every company to follow what we did. It's not like it's the right answer versus, that we were the innovators against the agile tech. I still think that there's a lot of validity into that. It's what we were selling, and it's what our customers wanted. And so we had to kind of give them the whole package before they would eat.
And I saw on your LinkedIn that you got your, was it the CSPO right before founding Divvy, the Certified Scrum Product Owner?
So right before Divvy, I was working with a custom development shop. So ultimately, like I was on the sales side of that, but we were talking about the applications and building it with the team so much. So yeah, ultimately I became a certified Scrum, product master, whatever they call it, a couple months before we launched Divvy. Yeah.
So having just done that right before going and launching Divvy, did you have any trepidation with the way that you were kind of building quietly, maybe not quietly, but building privately for 2 years before really getting a test?
The only reason I'd say that is like, I get that Scrum is this like every 2 weeks, iterations. As a salesperson, I would say like if you're in sales, well, there's 2 ways to go about this. Some people look down on sales. A lot of people do. It's kind of like, oh, you're a salesperson. That means you're an idiot, or that's where you
like you're a jerk.
People and
you lie to people,
salesman, right? Okay. I'm like, well, but my experience in sales is what taught me how to find product market fit. Like I know when I'm selling a square peg in a round hole. You can feel it. The second you get on the phone and like, hey, do you want to buy this water? And the person's like, I don't even know what water is. I'm not thirsty. But when you sell them this water and they're like, oh my gosh, I've been looking for water that tastes like your water. Like, this is amazing. You're like, okay, I know that I have a product that my customer wants. So when Blake and I were talking about it, I'm like, Blake, I've had 50 conversations this month that are saying that this water, this thing that we're building, not the cap, not the label, the whole freaking thing is what they want. It's going to sell. I'm telling you. So I kept selling in that time that we were building, and I kept saying, well, here's what we're going to be building. And they'd be like, yeah, give me that. So I think I would say I had enough confidence in what we were still iterating and I'm still talking, and still showing. We just weren't releasing it fully to the end customer yet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was curious, like, did you have any issues with the confidence to keep going if you hadn't had the sales yet? But I guess if you were already
Blake and I
selling,
to our compliment and detriment, I would say like we were very confident. And I was confident because I had literally been selling this and I knew it was not a square peg in a round hole. I knew I had a perfectly fit key for the door we were unlocking. And so I'm like, yeah, I've had enough of these conversations. I know what it looks like. We have it. So just keep going.
And at what point did you know? So it sounds like you had the confidence the whole time. And I'm sure there were moments of doubt where things were really hard.
Moments of doubt. But so overall,
I'll walk that back just a little bit. It was hard, and I'm sure moments of doubt. But at what point did you realize, oh, this is going to be like bigger than big? Did you ever realize pre-acquisition how big it would be?
It's a roller coaster, right? Like I would always say that things are never as good as they seem, and they're never as bad as they seem. What I meant by that is like there were days where you'd walk in the door and you would say, I'd look at my wife and I'd be like, we did it. Like, Megan, this thing is bigger than big. And then 2 days later, you're coming home and you're like, it's over.
I don't know if we're going to make payroll. Like, we're going to have to shut this down.
We got to shut it down. Like multiple stories of like, well, this thing happened because of this compliance manager at this bank and it's over. I'm just going to get on LinkedIn and see what other jobs are out there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, definitely a roller coaster. But I would say the first time Blake and I knew, we went to U.S. Bank in Minnesota. They were going to be one of our initial bank partners. And we showed up looking like this, like whatever, T-shirts and jeans. And we're at U.S. Bank, in one of their main conference rooms. And a bunch of higher-ups come in. And they got their suits on, and there's like 8 of them, and there's 2 of us. And, we don't even have a freaking product. It is a clickable prototype we're showing these guys. And yet we, for the next hour, we showed them what the future of banking was going to look like. We're like, this is what people want. This is what we're building. And you could see their body language. You could see their questions. You could see the energy in the room. And they're like, oh my gosh, like they're right. Like they knew we were right. Didn't mean that they'd never thought about this, but they were just like, yeah, no, this is the future of banking. And so we left that room. And again, there's a long way to go from that type of conversation, but we left that meeting. We went to dinner, and that was when we quit our jobs. We're like, we have to do this.
How early on was that?
This was, I think it was July of 2016. So we ended up officially leaving our jobs in August. But like, that was when we knew it was game time.
And you said you could feel it in that room.
Oh yeah, you could feel it. Yeah.
Was there any sense that you had where they were tense? Were like, oh, these guys are going to come for us? Or was it all like they were on board to partner with you?
If you know my partner, Blake, he would say,
I don't know him, but I've heard little snippets from him.
We're coming for you.
Yeah.
It's like, Blake, we're in t-shirts from Utah. We don't even have a product. These guys are US Bank. But he was right in the sense of like, yeah, I mean, US Bank's not out of business. That's not what he was saying. But he's like, no, over time you will be, because this is what the future of banking will look like. They will have this type of software. They will have this technology, and the customers are demanding it. So, yeah, I mean, that was it. We came out of that. We felt it. We knew it. We knew we had a tiger by its tail. We just had to execute. And that's the type of confidence of like, keep going. So even when you get smacked in the face, like twice in the next 3 months after that meeting, we got smacked in the face where we thought it was over. But it's like, no. But if we can solve that thing that just smacked us in the face, there's still the tiger by the tail. Like we gotta keep going. And yeah.
So tell me about those, like, well, twice in the next few months, we got smacked in the face. We thought we might have to shut down. Like, how, with each of those moments, how much of you thought, oh, we're going to have to shut down? And how much of you thought, well, what if there's a way we just don't know about yet? We just have to push through.
So the first one was the card I already mentioned earlier, was basically saying we have to have a physical card, which by the way comes with a whole other list of like compliance and logistical nightmares and all this stuff. That one was like, is like our vision was ruined. Like the bubble had been popped. And we're like, we can't build the thing we want to build. We got through that in a couple of days. You know, once we like sat down, we're like, well, we can tell the card what to do, and we can represent the card on the screen, and, you know, make it feel like it's smart, which is what we ended up doing. But the other one was, you know, US Bank, big giant company, right? It's not one decision maker, but some middle manager sent an email to Blake like on a Friday or a Thursday afternoon.
Oh, those are the best.
Yeah. And they're basically like, hey, because of this government compliance thing that's happening, you've been shut down. Like, they don't care who we are. We're nothing at this point to them. So they're just like, hey, just so you know, you've been shut down. You cannot issue cards, blah, blah, blah. And it was a death sentence.
Yeah. I'm sure that one felt more real than the other one you just mentioned.
The other one was like, there's got to be a way around this.
Yeah.
That was under our control.
Something to figure out.
Yeah, which are constantly popping up.
Yeah.
And that's why I would always tell people they're never as good as they seem. It's never as bad as it seems, because like there's always a way to solve something. You can figure it out. But with this one, it was like, oh, they're telling us we're done because of some compliance thing. And it was like, well, it's out of our control. There's nothing we can do here. And that was just like, it was rough. I mean, like Blake and I remember we were in his office, which was this corner office, had a glass, door, and you were like, we could look out, we could see all of our employees, and we had awesome people, and we really connected with a lot of these people, and like they're friends at this point. They have families, and you're like, should we go tell them? Should we tell them it's over? Should we tell them to stop coding because it doesn't matter anymore?
Go prep your resume.
And ultimately, it was like, hey, let's just go home. Take a breath. I think it was the weekend, so it must have been a Friday, because it was like, hey, take a breath. Let's just go through the weekend and we'll figure it out. I think Friday at around midnight we were texting. Saturday morning we were texting. By Monday we were on a plane to the East Coast to go meet with other banks. And we ended up finding another bank, and we ended up getting through it, and we're just like, screw it. So we had to rewrite all the APIs and redo all the stuff, but it was like what felt like it was over. And there's like a pit in your stomach, because you're like, I have all these employees we're about to let down. I have these investors whose money we've just spent for no reason. It's pretty, What I would say to people, that have never been in those shoes, and here's a good example of what I mean. My partner, Blake, was the CEO. I was not. So a lot of things we shouldered together, but there was a lot that I couldn't shoulder with him. It was his decision.
Yeah.
And there were times where I could say I was jealous of Blake, or, he got paid more, or he had more, he could be more of a generalist because he's overseeing all the specialists, and I was asked to be a specialist in certain areas. And, the classic, like, I wish I had his role. But when you've never been the one in charge and felt the nature of responsibility, it's really easy to complain and really easy to say someone else isn't doing it right. But when you're in the arena and you hold the baton of control, there's a pit and a responsibility with that Blake had to face, that and any true founder has to face. And I respect it because it's tough. It's very emotional, which is odd.
And that baton that you hold, it is the weight of, if I make the wrong call here, it's not just me that faces these consequences. It's everybody. And
by the way, I used to drive. When we eventually sold Divvy, I think we had, 700-800 employees, something like that. Drive from my house, like in Orem, up to Draper. And it would like blow my mind as I'm driving up, and I'd be like, there's like 800 houses that we're paying for. Meaning, like, we're paying these employees money so they can pay the mortgage. So that's like entire, little cities essentially. Yeah. You're just like, we're paying for that whole freaking, you're just like, you realize like that is so many kids and friends and families and, beds. When you really think about it, it gets overwhelming, and, you can't blame it on anyone else. You have to step up and do the best you can. And I think sometimes we did great, and other times I'm sure, we failed, and people would say that we didn't do the right thing, or we did it. We could have done something different. Sure. Like, but that's the person holding the baton has to hold that.
And I think that's really cool, right? There's two ways you can think about that, of like, we just built a whole mini city with 800 houses. But you also have the power that where if you make the wrong call at the wrong time or whatever, well, that's now 800 houses that the mortgage isn't paid, if things go sideways.
Yeah. So when you make that decision, you think about the lights in the city going off because you're like, oh, shoot.
Yeah. It's a big weight. I've got a wife and 2 kids. I don't have 800 houses filled with, wives and kids. So I feel for, I try to place myself in those shoes sometimes as I get to meet people like you and others who've been on the show here, where I'm like, wow, this person has really made heavy decisions. And I'm sure that weekend where US Bank said, hey, the government said no, which is really like a little side tangent here. Like, I've talked to so many people where in the name of compliance, we're not doing something. Like, that's not what the law says. Like, that's your interpretation of something. But I'm glad you guys were able to work through that. So moving from 2016, 2018, we're building, we're growing. And then when did the acquisition take place?
2021. Okay. June.
So 2021, which is actually right when I was interviewing at Divvy back in the day as an SDR. Ended up not taking the job. I went to Morgan Stanley instead. I've often wondered, was that the right call? But that's we'll never know.
So June 21, middle of COVID. So that added a lot of funny elements to the negotiations and meetings and stuff.
But did that change like valuation estimates or anything?
No, I don't think so. Well, okay. Small story time. And when was it? Now I'm going to forget the time. Oh, no. It was the year before. It was in 2020, right when COVID hit. We were actually due a lot of money from our Series C investor. So we'd raised $175 million. $25 million we got up front. $50 million was coming at the end of the month, so 30 days, because they wanted us to hire this one role. And then the remaining 100 was coming in a year, which we didn't need the money immediately. So it was like, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
They hold on to the capital. But what's crazy about that is like, everyone in the public eye, everyone around here sees that we raised $175 million at, $800 million valuation or 700 or whatever it was. So everyone here is like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And it was great. Yeah. But you're like, but that money's not in our account. And, there's not a worse feeling than like spending a check that hasn't cashed, And so for the next year, we worked, we nailed, we killed it. We did everything. Like Divvy never missed a number, ever. We always did it. And, kudos to our team. And the money was due end of March in 2020. So just pause and think about what was happening in March of 2020.
Yeah.
COVID happened, MBA shuts down, everyone shuts down, we quarantine. It was crazy times. No one knew anything at the time. So our investors stopped answering the phone. And they literally told us, yeah, you're going to go out of business. I'm sorry. That's what happens. It was over. Because, by the way, we'd been spending, and the whole time we'd been like, dude, we want to stop spending. You need to give us the rest of the money. And they're like, no, that's coming. Foregone conclusion. Keep going. Well, but we didn't get the money. And so when it came down to it, they eventually answered the phone. We eventually, we said, hey, we need money. And they said, well, we'll give it to you at a way, way less money, a way lower discount or price. And they changed all the terms.
Was that legal or?
I mean, they have a player option, I guess is the way to phrase it. So sure. I mean, like they did what they were allowed to do. And it sucked because it was like, wait a minute, this whole year we've been doing exactly what you wanted us to do. We nailed it. And at the end of the day, we had to let a lot of people go. And that was, that day was one of the worst days because it's like, we really didn't feel like that was our mistake. We felt like we've been doing everything and asked everything our employees had been like,
they've been hitting the numbers
them to do. Yeah. And so we ended up, eventually having to let people go, and we didn't take money from them. But once we got through the craziness of COVID, we were able to come out on the other side and work things out. And then, eventually a year later we sold, for a lot more, which is great.
Yeah. And so that brings us to, I think, the reason why I've got you here. So we were talking, right before we started filming, where the podcast is structured as a season being modeled after a real MBA's curriculum. And with an episode following a real class, loosely. Most people's stories don't line up exactly with one class. But I thought you'd be the perfect person because, you had early exposure to business. It's kind of in your blood at this point. It seems like you had failed entrepreneurship opportunities, and then you had this massively successful one. By my terms, I'll call it massively successful.
I feel good about it.
And then now, we won't go to now, but right after the exit, the acquisition, you felt lost. You felt like, what's the point? Where's my purpose? Tell me about that moment, and then what led to what you're doing now with Factory for Good.
Yeah. Okay, so we sold in June. I think it was like June 7th or something. I can't remember. 2021. I was gone like a day later. Like I knew I was gone. That was part of the transaction. I was going to leave. And how do you think I felt? A week into it, 2 months into it. How do you think I felt?
I mean, I read your book, so I kind of know the answer.
You know the answer. So you can just tell everyone how I felt.
Yeah. So I mean, it was the honeymoon phase, right? It was incredible.
First couple months, it was like, because it wasn't just Divvy, right? The 4 companies prior to Divvy, I was also working crazy hours and startup-like mindsets and all in. And so it really was a detox. And it was so great to just like be with my kids and be more present than I had been in the past. And it was amazing. Do some fun vacations with kids, family, friends. But yeah, as I, the book, but as the fall came in, my kids went back to school, my friends are at work, and my wife's doing her thing. And she's kind of like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm taking piano lessons today. And I joke, but I took magic card lessons. I took golf lessons. I was just doing things. I was busy. And I kind of had this feeling. I was just like, man, like what I realized is I missed building. At Divvy, the people we could build with and what we were building felt so big. We were just all locked in. And like you're together, and there's something about being together and feeling that stress together and going to work and being like, let's go. And challenging yourself that there's this purpose, there's this fulfillment in building. And I realized that I'd lost all of that. I lost my structure. I'd lost purpose. Like what was my purpose? I'd lost a lot of friendships. I didn't see them every day. So, instead of going to work and being inspired by a bunch of great people that motivate you to be better, I'm at home playing the piano by myself. And I was like, so I went to bed one night, and I say this again in the book. I'm like, kind of confessed to Megan, I'm like, I'm not happy, which is not my personality. No matter financial success or not, I feel like I've been fortunate enough to have healthy mindset, healthy and happy. And I just was like, I'm dying here.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a shock. It was a surprise to me, right? Because the other thing that gets weird is people on the outside look at you and they're like, grass is green.
Yeah.
Like you have everything in the world you could ever want. And I started to realize, like, actually, I'm jealous of you because you're still building and creating and motivated and, going. And that was just something I didn't expect, I guess. And it kind of threw a curveball my way. And I say this all the time. I have to caveat it with, like, I get it's the world's tiniest violin that people are not going to, I'm not asking for empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Not trying to say, cry me a river, my life's hard. What I'm trying to say is I didn't realize that was going to come. And therefore, it was very hard for me to digest and figure out what's my identity, what is my purpose, what's my structure, and to actually build a life that I was then going to be satisfied with. Because again, you can buy a lot of things with money, but it's hard to buy fulfillment and happiness and purpose. And I was missing all those things.
Yeah, I think the constraints that a lot of people put on their happiness is, if I had more time, if I had more money, and somehow you had both and didn't have the happiness.
So what did I call it? We might have actually not even put this in the book, but I remember talking about it because it's something I've had on my mind for a while, and especially as we wrote the book. Okay, so think about just the nature of what you just said. Oh, if I had more money, I could build a bigger house or have that car or build out my basement. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Pick your thing, whatever your thing is, right? But there's this hope. If I had money or I'm going to work towards getting that money, I'd be able to be happy. Okay. That is at least a motivating thought. I should go work harder and I can go, finish out my basement.
Yeah.
You know what's a very naked thought? When you have the money and you do your basement and you're like, oh crap, I don't feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Oh shoot. I at least before had something I was driving for. I had a mountain I was climbing. I wanted to go make money to build a bigger house. There is purpose and fulfillment and energy in that motivation. When the money comes and you're like, I did it. I built the house, but I don't feel better.
Mm-hmm.
There's no hope. The hope is gone. It's like you're now naked and you're like, wait a minute. I now realize that I don't have that thing. And it's like hard to articulate. Even now I'm trying to convey it. And I'm like, no, I'm telling you, you probably don't even believe me. And I'm like, no. I had a conversation last night with my wife for an hour where she was in tears because she was trying to figure out some of this stuff, figure out what to do and how to respond and how to shape things. And money's a funny thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Somehow there's a honeymoon phase to everything, and everything wears off.
Sure.
Right. Mm-hmm. And the items, the experiences just get more expensive, but not more fulfilling. Would that be?
I had a friend who told me once, I was young in my career and he was a successful guy. And so I was like, hey, I was kind of asking, like, is it worth it to be successful? Is it financially? Is it worth it to be rich? Let's ask that question. And he's like, well, he kind of said it this way. He's like, well, if you're rich, you take your family to Hawaii. Okay, but if you're not as rich, you take your family to California. And if you're not as rich, you take your family to Arizona. And if you're not as rich, you take your family to St. George. And if you're not as rich, you go camping.
Mm-hmm.
And his point was, you're still with your family. You're still going on vacation. Your kids wouldn't know any difference. They would have a blast being with their friends and the parents. And it was this like realization of like, yeah, I get that there are nicer hotels and stuff, but I guess someone who's been on both sides of the coin, I'm telling you, there's not a happiness factor because one has a nicer bed. It's who you're with and what you're doing. And, like the strength of that relationship. That was what I was trying to say with my grandparents is I think that my grandpa might have missed the point on the strength of relationships and the importance of that because he was so successful chasing money, and he was, that he forgot that actually it's not about the size of your house or the car that you drive. It's about the people in the house and the people you're driving with that make life worth living and make life successful. And that a lot of people can lose sight of that when they put money as their main object.
Yeah, I think often there's a baseline, but even then you can be like below the baseline. Like my wife and I went to Fort Lauderdale a few years ago for a little vacation. Our hotel room was cheap and we found cockroaches in it and it was kind of gross. We had a great time.
Yeah.
you know? It was like objectively not a nice hotel.
Have you been to like third world countries?
No.
You've been to Africa or South America?
I've been to West Virginia. If that counts.
I mean, kind of. No. So, you know, what's crazy is like, you know how many people I've met in a third world country? They live in like a dirt freaking home. You know, they have food, but they like, it's rice every day.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe some chicken every other day. And things of that nature. Like they're just poverty. Biggest smiles you've ever seen on their faces. They're so freaking happy. You're like, what? How is it that half the people in Utah County that are successful and make over $100,000 a year, whatever number that they have, and they're on medications because they can't figure themselves out? It's like, because that's not the equation. That's not actually what drives happiness. There's obviously baseline needs like safety and health and food and water and stuff. But if you're food secure and all those things are taken care of, the rest is like cream on the top, and it can be really nice. And I would say you find happy people all over the world in all sorts of different situations. So just get that out of your mind as like, oh man, if I could make X amount of money, I'd be happy. Like it's just a dumb statement. It's clearly been proven wrong.
So I think that's a great segue then. So that's not the equation for happiness, which is the realization that you came to. So what's the idea behind Factory for Good?
So the hope was to come up with an equation, which our equation was essentially purpose, relationships, and legacy. Purpose is about yourself, finding personal fulfillment and purpose by having a direction. So when you wake up in the morning and you take a shower, you're like, I know what I'm doing today. You're building, you're creating. And then relationships was like, okay, go outside yourself, go to your circles, right? Friends and family and people you're around and maintaining those. And then legacy, which, you know, legacy is a weird connotation for a lot of people, but legacy was more of just, okay, beyond your friends and family, what other impact can you have on the world? Just for good. So the reason we call it Factory for Good is we wanted to tell people, say, hey, look, I get it. When you start out your career, right, you have 2 young kids, you're totally in this spot in your career. I find there's incredible nobility in building your, you know, in your businesses and your podcast to create monetary success so you can provide shelter and comfort and food and opportunity. I love it. So when you do that, like you have this element of this purpose and that's all going down. But that your factory is producing money. That's what your factory is producing. At some point, if you're fortunate enough and you sell a business or you get to a financial spot, I want you to retool that factory and say, oh, it's no longer about making money. It's no longer about my factory just printing money. I now need to take money and make it one of my inputs. So it's my time, my talents, and my money. How can I now retool my factory to do good? Now, I can define what good is. We do a lot of conversations on what good looks like. But my point is if you, your spouse, and your kids come together as a family unit to produce good, and you guys are collective in that, and you have a mission around that, and you actually executed on it sustainably, like that will change your family and the world around you. That will leave a legacy that not only are you proud of, but one that your kids are proud of and your grandkids are proud of. And I think, we try to say, hey, I think this is the best equation to handle that situation of success. And that's what we tried to execute on.
And in your book, at first when I was reading it, I'm like, well, this doesn't really apply to me yet. I'm not in the position of having this burden of wealth. But then I found that wasn't really the case, where it became extremely relevant once I got to the sections about, well, how we teach money, financial concepts to children, which apply to ourselves as well, if we want to take that look at it. But as we think about, well, our children, how do we teach our children the right example? This applies to everybody, everybody with kids, at least.
Yeah.
You don't have to be wealthy because you are wealthier than your children. They have nothing. So you have the ability to teach principles to your children. And I don't mean to put your kids on the spot or that sort of thing.
I do it to them all the time.
So in that sense, how has your relationship with your children and your parenting style changed as you've gone through the startup dad?
Yeah.
Don't see the kids a ton to now you can do whatever you want, really.
Yeah.
How has that changed?
Okay, great questions. I'm going to start out by saying, obviously there's no one way to parent, and I'm sure we're screwing up a lot. But I'll tell you some of the things we found to be successful and what other people have been doing that I'm like, oh yeah, I want to copy that as best I can. First off, my older kid is 15 now. So she was 10. She at least has a memory of when I was working really hard, or when we lived in an apartment for the first 9 years of our marriage. We cleaned a bathroom. I cleaned a bathroom every night of our marriage for the first like 5-6 years. Not our bathroom, by the way, but like
custodial
a doctor's bathroom. Like, I was a janitor. And so she at least has a memory of some of those things, which is helpful. It really is, right? So it's a tremendous opportunity to have sold the business when I'm young, but also if my kids were older and they were all out of the house before we had found success, it would have probably been a lot easier in many respects. So, it's funny. The story that I would say here is like my wife grew up with not a ton of money. And so when she said, "Mom, I want a dress for school for homecoming dance," the answer was no. Why was the answer no?
We can't afford it.
We can't afford it.
Right.
So it wasn't like a complicated question.
Yeah.
So her mom like legitimately made her homecoming dress. Like, I'll do my best to put together. This is incredible, like woman, and incredible, like that's what happened. When my daughter comes and says, "I want a homecoming dress," what's the answer?
Well, it doesn't have to be no, right?
Okay. No, let's say I say no. Well, she's like, "Well, it's not because you can't afford it."
Yeah.
I'm not a moron. I know that you can afford it, right? She doesn't know numbers, but she understands we can afford this dress, right? So now it's a whole different conversation. It's a conversation of like, all right, well, it's no because we want you to learn responsibility, or no because we want you to earn it, or it's like yes, but maybe under this budget, and it's very easy for a kid to be entitled, and they're like, well, why? Like, why not?
Yeah, why yes with a budget?
Yeah. Why not buy me that? All my other friends are getting X, Y, Z. Whether regardless if that's true or not, I laugh at my daughter. She's like, all of my friends have X, and I'm like, all is such a strong word, but she'll say, all my friends have this, or they're getting that. And I'm, we're trying our best to be like, do you want to pay for half of it? Do you have a job? How much money is in your bank account? What is a reasonable budget? I mean, these are all great questions, and there's not one way to answer it, but we're trying to teach our kids some sense of like, yeah. We are a very fortunate, prosperous situation, but that doesn't mean you are. You still have to learn to build and to create and be scrappy and figure this out. Because if you feel like you're entitled to what mom and dad have, you're screwed. I mean, my kids are going to be like, unless I just want to pay for them for the rest of their lives, which even if I could or did or whatever, is not going to actually build the best version of my child. So if I want to be a decent parent, I got to figure out ways to give them opportunity without quote unquote hanging themselves, but also not withhold so much where they're being, they don't have the opportunity, right? So it's tricky. I don't know. Yeah. I don't have an answer. This is me just saying as a parent being like, we're trying. Our kids ultimately, I think actually this is a good question. Your kids are too young, so I can ask you, but it won't resonate now. But everyone, I would say in modern America, regardless if they buy their own car or they ride a bus or a bike, it doesn't matter. There's ultimately a mode of transportation question when they turn 16. And it's, what are you going to do about a car? And let me just ask you, what do you think is the right thing to do for if your kid turns 16 tomorrow? How would you handle the car situation?
We've actually talked about this a lot, even before having kids.
Okay.
Because I try to be very intentional about my kids. I maybe am not as intentional about everything else in my life, and I could be optimizing things better. But with my kids, I try to be very intentional. And even if we could pay for the whole thing, I would like to give them the opportunity to pay for whatever kind of car they would like. So if they want to pay half, then I will match that. So if they want to buy some old Camaro, fix that up, and live out the Transformers story, sure, I'll put in half the money. But I don't plan on buying the whole thing. I'm going to be your kid for a second.
Okay, I don't want to earn money though. I'll have a cheap car. Can you just buy me a cheap car?
I guess let's good question. I'll put in $2,000.
Okay.
Above the $2,000, I will match whatever you put in. And maybe $2,000's not enough.
Whatever the small number is.
Yeah. Well, you will get a cheap car.
Okay, cheap car. Cool. I want the $2,000 car, the $5,000 car, whatever the cheapest. I don't want to put in any money. Okay. Do I have to pay for gas? Am I paying for insurance?
Gas and insurance are on you.
Okay, gas or insurance are on me. Okay.
I'll send you the bill.
Okay. So it's this funny thing though of like, there's no right or wrong answer to this conversation we just had.
There's always more to it, right?
Yeah, there's always more to it. Well, okay, hold on. But mom, dad, I'm soccer. I'm playing soccer every day for 3 hours. How am I supposed to get money to pay for gas and insurance?
I promise you there's more time in the day. You can go work at Arby's like I did. Like I did sports too.
I'm getting a 4-0. I'm doing soccer. Like I barely have time to breathe. It's just like there's always these more conversations, right? And so, our daughter's 15, so we're having this conversation. And I found it funny when I interviewed, hundreds of people in financial situations to say, like, what are you going to do? Because everyone had a different answer. And look, the ultimate answer, I think, is, hey, your kids have to have ownership and responsibility to this thing that they have to some degree. You can say whether they paid for half the car, they paid for all the car, they paid for none of the car, but they paid for all of the gas and insurance. I don't care. But it's tricky. And especially when your kids know that you've had success, like my kids can Google it, right? They know, they've seen it.
They watch the first 10 seconds of this, they'll have an idea.
They know. I mean, I was with my kid the other day. He's 8. He's the youngest, and he'd heard something, and he goes, "Dad, did you sell your business for $2 million?" And I was like, "It's actually $2 billion." I didn't want to go 2.5. I was just like, "Yeah, it's actually."
By some reports I saw, it was 2.55 based on the way some shares settled or something.
And I just was like, well, it was actually $2 billion. And you could see his little brain kind of fry. And I'm like, well, hold on, bud. Like I said, there's thousands of investors involved and a lot of people. So I said, that's not dad, but but that's what the number was. That's what it was. And we're proud of that. And, it was just this funny conversation of like, okay, how do you let them know? Like, yeah, it was great. And we had the success and that's awesome. But that doesn't mean you have the money and you're still going to have to earn and create and build. And I'm going to help you throughout and we'll figure out ways to do that. But I can't enable you. I can't entitle you. I have to do my best to teach you responsibility and grit. And what's crazy about America and about a lot of people that have been successful is they're like, what made me is that I worked at Arby's when I was a kid, like you just said. But then when they are older and they have the money, they're like, well, I don't want my kid to go through the same crap I did. So then like, I'm not going to make him work at Arby's. And I'm like, well, that's what made you. Like, so yeah, it's a tricky spot, but we're doing our best.
If you don't have an answer or you don't have the right answer for this, I'll say, but if there's a spectrum of, well, we're hindering our children because we're really just not helping them at all, even though we can. And on the other side, we're enabling entitlement, on that sort of spectrum. Would you say it's better or worse? You can't be in the middle. Would you say it's better or worse to fall to one side or the other?
I would fall towards hinder. I would have said middle, but the reason I would have said middle and the reason I'm going to lean hinder is our daughter wanted a Lonely Ghost sweatshirt. I don't know. Your kids aren't old enough, but there's this stupid sweatshirt. Dude, it's the weirdest thing. I'm like, it's a sweatshirt. It has a ghost like that. It's like, it's just a regular sweatshirt and it has a stupid little logo on it.
Well, what? It's like $120 or something?
Yeah, it's like, no, it was like $80 or something stupid. It's way too much money for this
Still
sweatshirt.
Stupid.
Yeah. And my daughter's like, well, everyone's getting it. And they were, for the record. Like all of her friends were getting this sweatshirt. Most of them, their parents were just paying for it, which I'm friends with these parents. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying, she's like, well, get me this sweatshirt. And, with the bank of mom and dad, which is what we talk about in the book, we're like, well, hold on. Like, it's easy for you to just ask and just always be like, what can I have? Can I have? Can I have? Can I have? And then I have to be like, no. And it's like, it creates this friction all the time. And I'm like, I don't want to be the dad that's just like always telling you no, but I also can't just sit here and say yes. So the reason I say split in the middle is I'm like, Emery, if you pay for half, I will pay for half. I'm happy for you to have this stupid sweatshirt, but you also have to earn it to some degree. So, a lot of what we try to do is be like, I don't care what your friends are doing because I don't, right? Like it's nice to know what's going on and stuff, but it's like,
you're not really trying to keep up with 15-year-old girls.
I'm not trying to keep up with 15-year-old girls because I actually don't know the conversations that they're having with the parents or what they're actually contributing. It's just what you're telling me that you think you know. So a good example is like social media. It's like all my friends have Snapchat. I'm like, all of them. Like, and then you find out with some of the parents,
and
they
should
don't.
they even?
Yeah,
like,
should they? But then you realize that's not really all. And anyway, so so Emery though, she she has a job. She has to pay for half. She knows that she's going to have to pay. We're going to do our car situation. I will buy the car. It'll be my car, not her car, but she's going to have to pay me a monthly allowance. So call it $200 a month to just have access to the car. So, it's not going to be the world's craziest nice car, but it's like, here's a decently nice car. Yeah. We'll pay for gas and insurance, but you're going to pay me $200 a month to just have access to this stuff because you have to have some responsibility into the thing. So that is more hinder, meaning she's not paying for more than half, but it's like, they got to have some responsibility. They got to learn how to not just make money, they got to learn how to say the value of money. If I ask, do you want the Lonely Ghost sweatshirt? The answer is obviously yes. But then when I say, do you want to pay for all of it? She's like, no. It's like, okay, well, how much do you want this stupid sweatshirt? Oh, you're willing to pay for half of it? Okay. Like, there's like, they have to learn to make those cognizant decisions of what is a budget and how much do I have and look at what's in my bank account and okay, hold on, how much am I making this week she has a job just across the street, which is nice. She makes $45 a week. So not big dollars, but to her, it's like, okay, well, I have $45 a week and that's something. And it's like, all right, hopefully that motion at least is teaching her like how to live and how to make decisions. And so when she eventually gets kicked out of the house at 18, when she graduates high school, because she's sure as heck not living in my home, I'm like, Emery, when you go out to college, here's what we'll do to help, but here's where you're at on your own. And by the way, here's when we stop helping. So you're aware of what's going on and you can start working towards that and, hopefully get them to a spot where they can be on their own.
I imagine a lot of the failures, like of the ones who want to be successful with these parent-child relationships, just come from not communicating, not having a plan, and then not communicating it early enough, right?
Yeah, that's why in the Bank of Mom and Dad, we like literally tell people to write it down with their kids and say, whatever you're deciding to do, like there's really 8 or 10 things that you pay for. We'll call it home, transportation, food, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you can make a chart. In fact, we have on factorforgood.com, I believe it's still there. We have a chart where it's like, you just help your kids understand at some point to be dependent or independent, you have to be down here. You have to take care of all these things. Here's what those things cost. But if they don't have any clue what their lifestyle costs when they're 18 and they're at home as a senior in high school, how do you expect them to even remotely start paying for themselves when they're in college at 19 or when you kick them off, once they're out of school at 22? You have to communicate. You have to let them know what's coming. I would say, again, whatever your plan is, at minimum, you have to communicate the plan to your child so that they can work with you and you can talk through it and you can help guide them towards, well, start working, start saving. Yeah. Get to this spot. Yeah.
Well, I guess for Emery, I can empathize a little bit with the stupid sweatshirt because I'm a motorcycle guy. Yeah. Triumph Motorcycles is my brand of choice, although I've owned many. They have on their website this $120 fleece sweatshirt. I'm like, man, that looks so cool. And it's got the little Triumph logo as the zipper. $120. I haven't bought it. Wanted it for a year and a half, but I understand a little bit the value of money. I'm like, well, it's $120 for a sweater.
You could buy that sweatshirt.
I could.
Okay. And why don't you buy that sweatshirt?
Well, for $120, I could do other things.
Yeah. You're just like, I don't want it that bad.
Yeah.
Right. But by the way, even flip it, just like a money conversation for a second. I would argue in many instances, you wanting to want that sweatshirt is better than you actually buying the sweatshirt.
That's true.
It's a travel thing. A lot of people say, or there's some studies on like the anticipation of going to Japan is actually bringing you more happiness than the actual trip to Japan. And, in this case, I bet if I left your house and podcast and tomorrow I bought you the Triumph jacket, sweater, whatever, you'd be like, oh, cool. And then within a day, you'd be like, oh, that's just a jacket. It's just like, you wouldn't actually care. Yeah. It was the wanting it was almost a better feeling and almost brought more happiness is the pursuit of maybe one day I'll buy it versus actually having it. And I'm like, my point is having been on the other side of money and I know what that looks like. I'm telling people, I'm like, yeah, I'm just telling you, when you buy the Triumph jacket, it will not change your happiness level at all. I can say right now, how happy are you? And you give me a score out of 10. What do you want to say?
I'm pretty happy. Yeah, like 8.5.
Cool.
Maybe even higher.
Tomorrow, you're going to get that sweatshirt. I'm going to get it for you for free. Is that going to change your happiness? No.
I'll go up to 9 for a day.
Yeah. Up to 8.7 for 20 minutes. But it's like the answer is no. It's not going to change a single thing about your life. Yeah.
Well, one last thing on your kids. When it seems that you're trying to set up your kids for success, what are your thoughts on where you choose to raise children? And some people are, we'll call it stuck where they are. They don't have the resources to move. But for those who are willing to move, have the resources to move, how do you approach choosing where to raise your kids?
Like cities or areas or neighborhoods?
Yeah, like cities, areas. Like, do you have any thoughts on, if we live here in Utah, because you're not from Utah, but
no, I'm from Seattle, but we live here. We love it here, so we wouldn't move from here. But it's still a question of like where do they go to school? That's a good example. Which is the same question as where do you raise your kids, by the way. And
like school system.
Yeah, I mean, we have neighbors that send their kids up to the nicest private schools. They're 20, 30 minutes away, north or south. And we've thought, do we do that? Are we preventing our kids from learning as much as they could learn? Like, great questions. And again, I'm not here to say that private school is absolutely not the answer, because it might be for some people. But for us, what we realized is our kids, we want to raise our kids in a neighborhood with friends, because that's their reality. That's reality to these kids, is like, go trick-or-treating and hang out with your friends and be in your local neighborhood and run around at recess and stuff. And so although our public school system is mediocre at best, I mean, this morning my wife and I were like, we actually let our kids sleep in this morning because Megan's like, the boys hate school. They're learning nothing. They're in elementary school. It's not like high school, but they're still just like, it's not really that great. But what the question that we ask ourselves is, where do we want to raise them? And we're like, we want to raise them with the other kids, with society, as opposed to giving them private tutors and putting them in a private school and kind of removing them from a society, because that's ultimately the world you're going to live in, as the public world. So that was a choice we've made, and we've thought about it a lot, and we've contemplated doing other things. But there is something funny about, we'll call it the castle mentality. So a lot of people that have success, they end up literally putting gates around their homes, and they kind of retreat into the hills or retreat somewhere. And then it's a nice neighborhood where it's like, everyone else stay out. And I know why they do it. And, we live in a nice area as well. So I'm not, shaming them, but it also is this like, well, you're also crippling your children and not letting them actually live amongst all the people they're going to work with and for, and the people that are work for them, and all vice versa. And it's like, that's the reality they have to live in. So that's the choice we've made.
Stay in a community.
Yeah. Be a part of the community that, that, like, for example, Megan and I, our closest friends are our friends that we had when we had an apartment and I was, cleaning the toilets. Those are the people we still like have the longest and deepest and best relationships with. And it would be a total shame if we were like, oh, wait a minute, but now because of some dollar figure, we're like, well, we're going to go do these things, but those friends can't come, but we're going to leave them to go up here. It's like, no, those are the people that we love. We want to be with them. So let's do things with them. So we think it's hopefully the same thing with our kids, try to lead them there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And then getting back to another thing you talked about in your book, you mentioned the phrase "earn your sleep." Where'd that idea come from?
I'm only laughing because it's my old friend. His name's Chase Levitt. It was actually him. I served a mission for my church, and he just had this phrase. He's like, "Got to earn your sleep." And what he meant is like, you got to put in the work. So when you go to bed at night, you're like, dude, I worked today. I worked today by the sweat of my brow. I worked. I feel good about it. And I earned it. I earned this bedtime. What I realized in the honeymoon phase of selling Divvy was I didn't earn my sleep because I was dinking around all day.
Yeah, playing golf, playing piano.
Playing piano and eating lunch with people. And it was great. But I was just like, went to bed. I'm like, what the crap am I doing? I didn't earn my sleep. That's the best way of phrasing it. And so, what I would say, like, the point of purpose is like, well, what mountain are you going to climb? Because I was talking to someone the other day who's thinking about selling their business. And I said, sweet. What are you going to do after? And he's like, well, I don't know. Like I said, all I want you to know is you're going to do something, because otherwise you will go crazy. You're going to find another mountain to climb. So if you like climbing the mountain you're climbing, keep climbing it. If you don't like climbing it, fine, sell the business and go find another mountain. But don't for one second think you're going to sit on a beach and actually be happy, because you will not.
Right.
You're going to have to find something else that causes you to earn your sleep, which means you're going to sweat, you're going to be challenged, you're going to be pushed, because that's where we as humans want to need to be. We need to be creative. We need to be creators and builders and challenged and problem solvers. And when you do that, you come home like when I said to Megan that night when I was saying I wasn't happy post Divvy, one of the things I said is I'm friends of my jealous in the rat race. And what I was saying is like, they got to come home every day to the dinner table and they got to look their kids in the eye and their wife in the eye and be like, I earned my sleep today. I worked hard today. I hit my quota today. I did my thing today. It was hard. It was stressful, but I did it and I did it for you. Right? There's a feeling to that that's so awesome.
Mm-hmm.
When I wasn't working and I wasn't building and I wasn't creating and I'm just kind of sitting around all day.
Just wearing sweats all day.
Wearing freaking sweatpants. I was just like, I can't look my kid in the eye and be like, I worked today. Like my kid worked harder than I did. They went to school and they did homework. I'm like, man, I'm a loser. So that feeling, I would say, of like, really making sure that whatever you're doing, that you love what you're doing, you're building towards it. And if you feel like you earned your sleep, you're going to go to bed happy. And if you feel like you didn't, you'll feel it. And you can lie all you want, but you're going to feel it internally. And honeymoons last for varying degrees, for some people. But at the end of the day, you need to earn your sleep. So that was my buddy Chase. It was his quote.
And how are you earning your sleep right now?
Yeah. So it all started, I had a friend basically say, your kids have to know what you do for work. So I was like, all right, yeah, I got to go find a job. I do Tandem, which is venture capital with my partner, McKay. That's been a lot of fun, mainly because I love working with founders. I love talking to them, understanding their stories, seeing wherever I can help. Meaning if my story of Divvy and our playbook can help them, then like, I'm happy to pass it on. So that I've spent a lot of my time doing that. I really enjoy it. The other one is Factory for Good. It is a book, but we also created a nonprofit in which we are, we have pretty big aspirations. Right now, our North Star is to significantly impact 1 million people a year. And we're doing that by recruiting other families that are in position to give and say, hey, we can help you execute your philanthropy and help them get there. But we do it with this cause of like, can we take 1 million people a year that are suffering and bring them to stability, or from stability and bring them to flourishing? And it's exciting, it's challenging, it's scary, but every day there's a lot of things going on and we're building and scaling. And so I've got a for-profit and nonprofit that are both keeping me on my toes. And I come home at the end of the day and I'm like, where'd the day go? It's so busy. And it's, that's what you should feel like when it's earning your sleep.
So now that you're involved in a couple different things rather than just all in on one thing, the startup life. So how would you describe who you are? And then how would you say that's changed over the years as you've been involved in different organizations?
Can I, let me try to re-ask the question, see if I understand it correctly. Are you saying like, how have I changed from doing like startup life to, now it's more of like, I'm divided amongst a lot of stuff?
Yeah. You were startup life grinding all day, every day. And now you don't have to grind all day, every day. Maybe 10 years ago, if someone asked you, who are you? Well, I'm the Divvy guy, is how you mentioned it.
Yeah. And
I do this. How would you describe what you do now?
Yeah.
Who is Alex Bean?
It's true. I did talk about kind of the loss of, Divvy was, filled me with this identity of being the Divvy guy, and that was awesome. And then when you leave that, you're not just selling your company, you're selling your identity, and you were the Divvy guy. That's much different than being the Divvy guy. And, it's been a little bit of a process for me, but I'm really, I would say, content with where I'm at. And it's like, well, if someone said, who are you? I'd be like, I'm Alex. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a friend. I'm an entrepreneur who's trying to help other entrepreneurs. I'm someone who's learning the nonprofit space. I don't know it. I know I don't know it, but it's kind of fun to get my butt kicked and figure out and work with people that are smarter than me. So I would say, like, who is Alex Bean? I'd say I'm a person that is trying to retool his factory and feels like I know what the production of good looks like, and I'm doing my best to work in that factory every day to significantly impact the lives of hopefully 1 million people at some point. And so that's the mountain I'm climbing. And so therefore, like, that's who I am, is someone who's trying to take the resources that he has and has access to through other people to make the world a better place. And I think I know how I can do that. And that gives me a lot of hope and purpose to say, okay, I'm learning a lot about myself, but I'm pushing myself to figure that out and to ultimately become that person. And hopefully I look back in 5 to 10 years and say, oh my gosh, like, we did that. And now I've got to climb a different mountain. I'll figure out whatever that mountain is when it comes. So.
And you're still young, I would say. You still have a lot more.
Yeah, so, I know that there's a lot of gray hairs going on, but yeah, I'm not too old yet.
You still have a lot more left in your life and a lot more stories to build.
Yeah, but which actually that scared me for a while, by the way. To be like, I really hope when I die, they don't call me the Divvy guy, right? Because I sold when I was 36.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how sad would it be if I died at 80 and they're like, look at this thing he did.
Divvy guy's
36.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of pressure. I'd say I feel pressure to figure out what I can do that will be meaningful, maybe not to the world, but at least to me and to the people around me, so that when I die, it's like Divvy is one of 7 things I can say I've done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's frankly why I wrote the book. It was like a challenge of like, can I write a book? Can I do something that I think has some value? I don't know. Let's go for it. Definitely wasn't to make money, I'll tell you that much. But it was like, I do feel the stress and the pressure of trying to figure out what's next and how do I fulfill, not just my time, but how do I do other things that can match up to what we were able to do at Divvy? I don't know.
You still have time to figure that out.
Yeah, but it's a stress. I constantly am like, am I doing enough, or is everything just downhill from here? It's a good question.
Do you feel like with the remainder of your life, maybe you'll have another multi-billion-dollar exit, maybe not?
No, probably not, because I'm not building for profits like that. So it would have to be a total, lottery ticket.
Yeah. It would have to be a big change from your current path.
Yeah.
So you may not have another very public, big exit like that, or something to put you in the news. But as you think about what you want your legacy to be and all the things that stack up to make that legacy, it's not just the Divvy guy, right? Sure. It's not just father to a 15-year-old daughter. It's all your kids. It's all the things you were ever involved in. When everything's over for you, what do you want your legacy to be to your great-grandchildren? As you've never met your great-grandfather, but someone even in your book, you said somebody came to you and said, hey, you had a big impact on me.
I made decisions in my life because my great-grandfather existed and lived the way he did. Mm-hmm. I never met him, but yet I felt that it meant something to be a being because of some of the things he did. And I was like, I'm going to make decisions and, for the better because of who he was. So I have a framework that we use called Circle A, Circle B, Circle C, Circle D. And it's called the ABCs of relationships. And Circle A, I'll go through it quickly, but Circle A is basically like the people you would literally take a bullet for, right? So it's the 2 kids that you have, the 4 I have, your spouse, et cetera, right? There's going to be some more people on the list, but ultimately you write down your Circle A. Mm-hmm. Circle B, I call pajama friends. These are the best people in the world. You love them. They could show up unannounced in pajamas, and it's just awesome. Great to see them. They make your life better. They're the best people. Circle C are convenient friends, people that are probably at work, people that you like, but ultimately they don't have your back. You don't have their back. Like, they're good people. Mm-hmm. And D are distractions. Anywho, what I want to be known for is I hope my Circle A loves and respects me more than anyone else. Right? I'm not trying to impress the C's. I'm not trying to change the D's. I'm not even trying to be cool for the B's. I want my A's to be like, he was an amazing father, friend, husband. Mm-hmm. He really tried. He cared, and he was a good person. Like, I hope that when I die, they can step up to the pulpit and be like, I'm really sad he's gone. He was a good person. And, if and how and when I cement the A relationships, I hope that the B's can say something similar. Mm-hmm. And the C's can also be legacy that they might be kids in Africa. They might be local, kids here in Utah. I hope to just keep pushing out the circles of influence and impact in a positive way, in a way that when I'm gone or when I'm old or, when my work is done, whatever we want to define it as, people will be like, oh, we're missing someone built something that was special. And I'd like to make decisions in my life to reflect the type of decisions he made in his life and see if I can do it.
Yeah.
we'll find out. But, that would be my hope.
Yeah. And I think that's a very beautiful thing to want. And as I think about my life, something similar. I don't think that you have to build something like financially. We've talked about success kind of broadly, but also very specifically, it's not just money. It's a combination of many things. And when we say like, I hope to have built something really big, really impactful, you're referring to your relationships in part with that, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that influence of like your circle A relationships, those are the people who, if they understand that they were circle A and what that meant to you to be in circle A, I would imagine that's part of the biggest.
Can I tell you what I tell people to do?
Yeah.
So the exercise we have people go through, go do this with your wife, right? And any podcast listener, do it with whoever you would say is your closest circle A.
Mm-hmm.
Could be your older kid, et cetera. But go to them and say, hey, I heard of this thing called the ABCs of relationships, and you were supposed to write down your circle A, which the way to define circle A is someone that you would take a bullet for, that you would lay down your life for, which is, as I say, I have a lot of siblings that I'm really close to, and I think it's a fair analogy to say I would not die for all of them, right? So you have to be definitive, but to go to your spouse and say, you're obviously in my circle A, I would die in your stead, right? Just looking someone in the eye and saying that is a powerful statement. So say that. And then ask them this question. Say, it is my desire that we have an incredibly strong relationship. Right now, could you rate me out of 10? What is our relationship out of 10, right? Your wife's going to give you an answer. I promise you it's going to be in the 7 to 9 range. 8, she'll probably say 8, 8.5, 9, right?
Yeah, doing good.
Great. You're going to say, what do I need to do to get that closer to a 10? And then listen. Because the following things that come out of that person's mouth will not be negative. They'll not be critical. They'll be like, I asked this to my daughter, and my daughter's response was, I'd love it if you could spend more time just listening to me, like hear me out, just like come up to my room and talk to me. She never would have like proactively come down and be like, Dad, I need you to talk to me.
Yeah.
But when I told my daughter, I love you more than anyone else, short list of people, and I would die for you. What can I do to get to a 10? Some of the conversations I've heard and people have had and they've conveyed to me, it's really just a powerful conversation to say, hold on, how strong and how strong are your circle A relationships, and start there. Like if you're trying to figure out where do you stand in life, write down that list, talk to those people, get the grade, and figure out what you need to do more. And if you just work on that, you're probably going to end up moving your life in a better direction, whatever that means.
Well, I appreciate it. I think this has been very powerful for me, and I hope for anyone else who makes it to the very end of this episode. We've gone on for almost an hour and a half now.
Hey-o.
So anyone who is still here, how can those people reach out to you, hear more about your story, get involved with Factory for Good?
I would say come check us out at factoryforgood.com. Like you said, we're not just aiming for that certain audience who's high net worth, but we have a lot of exercises like the Bank of Mom and Dad, ABCs of relationships, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of cool technology, good content, great stories. We have a newsletter you can sign up for. So I would just say, come check us out there.
Okay, perfect. I'll put that in the description.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, Alex Bean, everybody.
Hey, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.